There's this guy on Twitter named Michael Rip, Michael.
Yeah.
Rippe.
Oh, the Ripper?
Hey, is that what they call him?
Yes.
Riper?
That's what I believe.
He's some chief something officer for some Bitcoin poker thing, but super analytics guy.
Okay.
He put out some good stats that we need to chit chat about.
All right. Good morning. Let's chat about it. Thank you, Pat. All right. So it is week 15 of the morning after. It's good to be back. It is December 16th, Monday. If you are seeing this, you are either watching on X, YouTube, or live streaming on IG. Instagram is probably like, what is he doing? But anyways, this is the best morning show on Mondays to break down the NFL, both real and fantasy. Been going all season long, and we're reaching the end here where we get to playoff time, many teams eliminated, and then you think of fantasy, and you could be in the playoffs. Maybe you didn't make it. Maybe you're about to go on your championship run next week. Whatever it is, super excited to talk to you about this week of football. It was a doozy. And of course, normally breaking down the real games to start talking fantasy. We'll talk fantasy towards the end of the program, but I've been bringing you some one-on-one shows with fantasy analysts and guests across the social landscape that have been breaking down start questions and everything you need to know, trying to help that as we get closer to the weekend. There is 2 games tonight on Monday night. We'll talk all about them, but I wanted to do for the morning after week 15, a live, just right into it, breakdown of the whole week. And you haven't gotten the box score breakdown yet. It is Monday morning. Box score breakdown this week comes out a little later today. I had to talk to my guy, TB, to really understand the box score more than I already did. There's a lot to talk about, and we're not going to waste any more time. So make sure you're following me, of course, on social at Mike Rippe. Subscribe to my YouTube. I don't use it except for this, but hey, we're doing it. And also you can see us on Instagram. If you have questions, put it in the chat. Try to get those answered. Appreciate everyone for being here. And of course, my guy, no other than the man, the myth, TB. What's happening today, my guy?
What's going on, Rip? How you doing, man? Week 15, we concluding the night, man. I am so excited to see these games and how everything concludes, man.
Dude, look, first off, everyone now has been watching this for many weeks. I've gotten consistently great feedback on. They say, "Who's your first guest, man? Who's that guy doing this stuff with every week? He knows this stuff." And obviously, Terrell Bush knows this stuff. Pro Football Post, BTB Sports, anywhere else you want people to follow and subscribe and get notifications on your content.
Hey, man, like you said, man, Pro Football Post on X, BTB Sports on Instagram, Terrell Bush 05 on X as well. I'm posting all of our stuff there, man. This week, I will definitely be posting a lot of our clips from this because I just have a good feeling that today's show is going to be a nice, jam-packed, and well-organized show today, man. So let's jump into it, bro.
We're getting right into it.
TMA Sports, man, let's do it.
Here's the thing. I got to say, we've been now at this. This is the conclusion of week 15. Mm-hmm. And the Philadelphia Eagles haven't lost in like 3 months, my guy. And no one knows the Eagles better than you. But let's just start Philadelphia, because one of the better games we had some. It's interesting week overall. We want to dive into it, but let's just start at the top with the Battle of Pennsylvania coming in. Philadelphia, you got Pittsburgh. I mean, this is all the top. Philadelphia wins again. So just break this all down, the game, and specifically what's happening in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is a hot topic all throughout the media last week with everything going on with Jalen, AJ, and so on.
Sometimes, Rip, when things are going just a little too well, sometimes problems just end up happening when they don't necessarily need to happen. And I feel like with this team, things have been going well with the run game post-bye week on a 9-game winning streak heading into this week. And earlier in the week, you get Brandon Graham going on SiriusXM Sports Philadelphia, and he's talking, and, he's coming at the relationship between A.J. Brown, between Jalen Hurts. And, A.J. Brown even said, one of the things that they needed to work on last week was their passing game. Now, we understand receivers, man, big-time receivers throughout the NFL, they want the football, right? And their success is mainly predicated off of the quarterback delivering them the football on a weekly basis. And so A.J. Brown's like, hey, man, look, I'm used to getting 1,400 yards, 1,300 yards, and right now I'm sitting at 800. I know the run game. I know the winning streak, but I need to get my numbers too. Hey, bro, Jalen Hurts, let's stir up the pot a little bit. And so throughout the week, you heard just jabs at the Eagles. Oh, is there turmoil in the building? Is this going to be similar to last year's team? Are things going to rear off and stir off into an outskirt? And are things going to then blow up in Philadelphia yet again? And yesterday we saw just an amazing performance all around from the Eagles, top to bottom, offense to defense. I mean, you just see it from opening tap, man. They were getting the ball. He was getting the ball to AJ Brown. The receiving game was working. The passing game was working. Jalen Hurts, 25 for 32, 290 yards, 2 touchdowns. But it's most importantly the way they were doing it, right, Rip? It's how they were doing it early and often. And this is a similar situation a few years ago with AJ Brown against the Pittsburgh Steelers, actually, back in 2022 when we were going on our 6-game winning streak to start that season. AJ was a little like, hey, man, I need the football. And against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he goes 6 catches for about 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. So yesterday, he has another breakout performance similar to 2022. Devontae Smith goes off, has 11 receptions for 109. Jalen Hurts shows. And last week, I also had questions too, right? I came on here, Rip, and I said, I want to see the passing game develop a little bit more. Now, we had success. Like I said, since week 4, since our bye week, we've had success running the football, and we've had more rushing attempts than passing attempts. And so ultimately, coming into today's game, they made an emphasis on the passing game, and it just showed throughout that, hey, the Philadelphia Eagles can run the football to win games. They can pass the football to win games. They can play defense to win games. And yesterday was a total team effort, and it just goes to show you that the Eagles are here, man. Health aside, man, everything is going well right now, and the winning streak, it shows for itself.
Winning games, you said it. I mean, they just keep winning. And when they did on Sunday, 27-13, Philadelphia kind of disposes of Pittsburgh. It wasn't really that close of a game. It felt like Philadelphia dominates throughout. You laid it out. Jalen Hurts, 25 for 32, great stats. I mean, not only does he get A.J. Brown involved, and they rectify all the media talk, which I don't try to buy into too much. AJ goes for 8 catches on 11 targets, 110 yards, gets in the end zone, right? And then you look at his compatriot on the other side of the field, Devontae Smith, and he goes for 11 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown on 12 targets. And talk about distribution there. You got both the guys working on the outside. They're without the star tight end Dallas Goedert. Saquon has a quiet game. He was injured in the game, so he came out a little bit, but it looks like he's fine. And after the game, Jalen talks about, his fingers broken. How do you think Jalen's health plays into all this? Do you think it's going to affect him down the stretch? Because obviously now winners of 10 straight, 12-2, tied atop the NFC, could be, looking at a home field throughout type of situation if they win out here and can win the top seed, which would be huge. Obviously, Philadelphia, tough team to play, but very tough to go into Philadelphia and the fans and everything in the playoffs. So what do you think about Jalen's and even Saquon? Do you feel like they're okay? Should something to be concerned about? Thoughts on their sort of injuries or potential to be injured?
Definitely. So I feel like the way we close out the year, right? I feel like helps us tremendously. We need to win the games because I know Detroit is right there at 12-2. Now we're both tied for a top of the NFC. Like you already alluded to, right? Going through Philadelphia is a lot different than having us go on the road on a potential NFC championship or potential NFC run. So health definitely 100% plays a part. And you see Detroit now, bodies after bodies after bodies are falling left and right. And so Jalen Hurts, the run game that he provides on a weekly basis, we saw it a couple years ago, even last year, actually, specifically talking to last year when Jalen was hurt and he was compromised. You saw it directly impact his game and the Eagles game overall. Saquon Barkley being dinged up is something that you have to be concerned about as well. But I feel like to end the season off, the games that we have, the strength of schedule that we have, it's not like we have to go through a gauntlet, right? Other than Detroit, who has a lot of division games still left. They have the Vikings, I know, coming up in a few weeks. And so they've got a stretch where they need to play starters. They need to make sure that they're healthy. They need to prioritize that. For us, we just got to make sure we continue to win the games the way we're winning games. Let's get Kenneth Gainwell some more touches. Let's get Jalen Hurts. Let's lean on the run game a little bit more so that we're and slow down on the carries too. He carried the football 15 times yesterday. Let's slow down on that as well, and I think we'll be good down the stretch. But like you said, health is definitely something you have to prioritize coming down the stretch heading into the postseason.
Yeah, and just to close it out here, I mean, you made some good points on the Eagles, and look, this is the week here. Philadelphia travels to Washington, where they can win the division this year. I know there's a wild stat that no team has won the NFC East back to back in like 20 years. I've seen this going around, but the Philadelphia Eagles, they can win the NFC East this week with a victory at Washington. And then they come home to finish the season with back-to-back home games, Dallas and the New York Giants. So this is really could be the game where, you know, it's hard to imagine them losing at home to Dallas or New York to end the season. If they beat Washington, and Washington, not only they, you know, lock in the division, but that's 11 straight. They could be at 13 straight going into the playoffs, where they could then be the one overall seed. I mean, this is turning into an incredible Philadelphia season, which started off very sort of rocky with the sideline stuff with Nick Sirianni, and and that's why when you get to the point where you start hearing later in the season Jalen and AJ are having issues and talk, and hey, they had won 9 straight coming into this week. You guys want to create controversy? It's the media, whatever. When this team just wins, whatever, talk to your talk. But AJ looked great, Devontae looked great, and it's exciting for Philadelphia Eagles fans. Let's go across the river.
Last point, Rip. Just one last point.
Yeah.
AJ Brown said it perfectly post-game when they asked him about it yesterday, right? That was our moment to tell everybody shut up. When him and Jalen Hurts connected on that touchdown, he ran up to him. You saw us put his hand around him, put his hand on his helmet. They danced. Sometimes you just got to stir the pot a little bit, right? And it's all brotherly love, right? That's what Philadelphia is prone for, right? Brotherly love. And at the end of the day, when you end off the game too, Rip, with a 21-play, 88-yard drive that lasted 10 minutes, that team can win in a bevy of different ways, and it showed yesterday. And like you said, stirring the pot a little bit, sometimes you got to. Sometimes you look for problems when you don't necessarily have to, when things are going just a little too well. So like you said, Commanders next week is going to be a big one, and closing out with the NFC East stretch is also going to be a big one, but I think we'll be able to close that out on a strong foot.
I think so too. And look, at 12-2 right now, you're tied atop the NFC division conference, as you mentioned, with Detroit 12-2. Minnesota plays tonight, has a chance to get to 12-2. So very top-heavy and National Football Conference. Let's switch it to the AFC and the loser in the Battle of Pennsylvania. What do you think about the Steelers? I mean, obviously, I've been watching a little bit more of the Steelers on Hard Knocks. I've been loving the Hard Knocks in season with the AFC North. It's been really exciting to watch. Especially you see Mike Tomlin and you get this extra appreciation for the way that he gets his team ready and pumped and stuff. But what we saw, I think, this Sunday against Philadelphia, not only the step up in competition, but we saw that obviously they lack the weapons if George Pickens is out, especially when the running game, like Najee's going to fumble the ball and you turn the ball over. They really felt like they were more one-dimensional, and Russ didn't have a lot of outlets. What did you take away from the Pittsburgh side of the matchup? And, they're still in a good place, but obviously a tough loss.
They are still in a good place. But like you said, tough loss, and you can see the direct impact that George Pickens being out has on this offense, right? The downfield explosive plays. I mean, other than the flea flicker and I believe one other downfield pass, there really wasn't anything that was going for them. I mean, the Steelers had 163 total offense, and that was the fewest they've had since 2010 against the Titans. And so when they had 127 via ESPN stats. So it just goes to show you, when you have one player that goes out and your offense is diminished and depleted the way that it was, you got to make sure this offseason they've just got to go get a few more weapons right on the outside, a few more, another dominant receiver, another wide receiver one that can make plays when Pickens is out or alongside Pickens. But one person being out shouldn't have that much of an impact on your team, but it showed yesterday that it was. Russell Wilson, I mean, look, he's been playing well. The Steelers have been playing well. I don't want to take too much away from it. Like you said, they're still in a good spot heading into next week now. They've got to get things together because they face off against Baltimore, who that could be for the division right there. If Baltimore ends up winning that game and they close out the season undefeated, they could potentially take that crown from them, where it was looking like the Steelers could run away with it. So ultimately, don't want to take too much away from it. It was a battle of Pennsylvania, and ultimately the Eagles did prevail. But at the end of the day, when George Pickens is out, the offense is depleted the way that it was. The defense held on for a point in time early too and throughout the game, but ultimately, once time of possession was the way it was, he couldn't hold on to the ball, couldn't develop drives, ended up happening the way that it did. So don't want to take too much away from the Steelers, but next week is a big time game for them.
Perfect foreshadowing. That's where I want to go next, but I just want to close the topic on Pittsburgh in the matchup. these numbers are not going to get it done no matter what. And obviously Pittsburgh, they do lose. They only score 13 points. They're now 10-4, but Russell Wilson, 14 for 22, 128 yards. Quarterback need more out of it. Rushing, Najee Harris, 6 for 14. Jalen Warren, 4 for 12. Yikes. And then, your top receiver, Calvin Austin, 65 yards. They didn't have a lot of offense. Like, they gotta get more offense if they want to compete, especially in the playoffs. But speaking of the team they're competing for to win their division, you said it yourself, Baltimore, and Lamar Jackson looked like vintage Lamar Jackson. Didn't even finish the game. He goes for 5 touchdowns. Obviously, an easy one in New York against the Giants. What do you think about Lamar's performance and the Ravens, and now coming into this big matchup that's going to see Pittsburgh and Baltimore matchup, which could be essentially the game that decides who wins the AFC North?
This was a crucial game for them, right? And not a crucial game in terms of who they were playing or a must win or anything like that, right? It was definitely a must win because you're playing the New York Giants. But at the end of the day, they needed the confidence heading into next week that we could put up the amount of points that we did. Lamar can play the way that he did, and they ended up winning the game the way that they did, right? It's all about the way that you look at this point in time in the season, right? The offense was flowing. Lamar Jackson was looking like prime Lamar Jackson, running around, making plays, stiff-arming guys, throwing the ball down the field, making electric plays as we know him to do and as we've got accustomed to him doing. And so heading into this week, it was crucial for them just to make sure that, hey, let's get off on the right foot. Let's go into MetLife, handle business the way that we're supposed to, coming off of a tough loss to Philadelphia. Let's make sure, and coming off of the bye week, let's make sure that we kind of settle the chinks down in the armor, make sure that we've got everything tightened up, because these last couple of games, they've got the Steelers, the Texans, and then the Browns. If they beat the Steelers next week and they close out strong, they can end up taking that AFC North crown. And so it's crucial for them to make sure that this week we handle business the way that we did. Next week, the game is on, man. Down and they're at home this game. They're at the bank. So they need to make sure that they win this game next week in order for them to propel their season back to where we originally saw it, right? Because early in the season, Rip, we saw the Ravens come out hot. They came out hot. We're looking at Lamar as a potential MVP. He's still a candidate, but I think, someone else might take the crown yesterday. But ultimately, we want to see Baltimore look like this, hit their stride at the right time. And I think they started off on the right foot doing so and taking care of business yesterday.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. There's not much more to add here. Baltimore 35-14 over the New York Giants, who looked, obviously their season is done, lost. They're trying to figure out who to play, and we'll have to see if their coach Brian Daboll and GM Joe Schoen get to have another year at this on the New York side. Baltimore, though, comes into this big matchup next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have to, it's almost a revenge game, too. It's always a big battle, but obviously Pittsburgh got the better of them a couple of weeks ago, 18-16 in Pittsburgh. Justin Tucker missed a number of kicks, so that's really, I think, going to be what it comes down to. You'd like to see Will Tucker get it going here in the big games when it matters. He was, good on Sunday, but we'll have to see in the games that matter in this one against Pittsburgh, and this will be a fun one in the battle of the AFC North. You talked about it. Lamar had a great game. Is an MVP-worthy season he's putting forward, but it seems like he's not going to win it this year because of this other guy, and that's the guy that's put on the cape week after week, time after time, having a season of seasons for Josh Allen. He does it again. I saw a stat this morning. He's had 10 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, 5 passing, 5 rushing, no interceptions. It feels like Buffalo scores 45 points a game now. It's unbelievable offensively what he's doing. So talk to us about the big matchup that was the top 2 teams coming into the week, Buffalo and sort of Detroit, if you looked at the conferences. And Buffalo goes into Detroit and gets a big W. So what was your takeaway, not just on Josh Allen and his sort of MVP level? It seems like he's got the MVP locked in, but his performance in the game, Buffalo as his team, the AFC, and then Detroit. We'll talk about them too. So the big game here as well.
Let's deep dive into it then, Rip. Going into Motor City, right? That's an incredible atmosphere to play against, right? If you're the rival team or if you're the opponent team coming in, and Buffalo coming into their building, the way that we've got all of these things going around, right? Josh Allen, of course, coming off of the historic game that he had last week, following it up with the game that he played yesterday, but being able to win the way that they did, right? Despite putting up 48 points, Detroit was still in the ball game coming down the stretch. And if it wasn't for, a recovered onside kick, they potentially could have made, a couple last minute throws at the end zone to squeeze out that game. But throughout the game, you just see, man, Josh Allen is making everyone around him better, right? Despite the defense, giving up the amount of points that they have been, a bend but don't break style that they've got going on. But Josh Allen is putting a cape on this season. He's putting a cape on. He's doing what we wanted to see him do for the last few years. And everyone, coming into the season, having him as a projected MVP candidate. This is why he is the MVP of this season, because of the things that he's able to do on the football field, carrying the Buffalo Bills. He's literally carrying the Buffalo Bills. And I mean, everyone around him is being able to play their best because he's playing his best. Yesterday, I mean, you could go through the stat line, but I just want to go over the historic play, the historic stats that he put up. I mean, Allen in his last 2 games, 854 yards, passing and rushing, 10+ passing and rushing touchdowns, the most consecutive seasons in NFL history with 35 combined pass and rushing touchdowns. He did this last year and he's doing it again this year. The first player to have back-to-back games with 2 passing and 2 rushing touchdowns. Last week, he had 3 passing and 3 rushing. And seasons with 25 passing touchdowns and 10 rushing touchdowns combined. Josh Allen has 2. The rest of quarterbacks in NFL history have 2 combined. Kyler Murray in 2020, Cam Newton in his MVP season in 2015. So Doug McDermott said it best. That's the best I've ever seen him play yesterday. That's what Sean McDermott, French. Sean McDermott has said. I'm thinking about basketball when I'm talking Doug McDermott. Sean McDermott said that's the best I've ever seen him play. He puts the cape on. He's doing things unlike any other player has ever done, and he's putting up yardage numbers. He's putting up video game numbers, Rip. He's putting up Madden. It's looked like a Madden created franchise right now that Josh Allen is doing. I think he sealed up the MVP with a huge win. I said it last week. If he goes into Detroit this week and puts up a performance similar to the one he did last week, overall, it just goes to show you, man, Josh Allen is here. And I think this is the best Bills team we've seen collectively over the last few years, the way that Josh is playing. Overall, you got to look at the way that he's playing. But taking it down to the Detroit, and I'll keep it brief here. I mean, I said it earlier. The injuries, Rip. Sometimes it gets to a point where it's unsustainable, and they dropped 3 bodies yesterday. When you look at it, I forgot the names of each player that dropped, but I know one was rolled off on an ankle injury, and a few were. You got Aiden Hutchinson, a few, earlier in the season who had a broken leg, and you got guys coming off. They're taking guys now off the scrap. They're taking guys from the McDonald's cashier, and you got guys coming out of the scrap heap, trying to sustain a season that looks like, I mean, right now they're 12-2. I don't want to hit the panic button from it, but it's just unsustainable when it comes to a point in time, man.
Yeah, no, your points are great. I want to add to it because those injuries have continued to pile up for Detroit. It feels like game after game after game, defensively unbelievable. And the names are right here. They lost Carlton Davis III, Aleem McNeil, and Khalil Dorsey. And all of those injuries appear to be serious. It seems like Davis and McNeil are probably done for the season. It's not clear on Dorsey just yet. That's what I'm getting this morning. And obviously you touched on, they lost Hutchinson a while ago, and they just continued to lose the players, which kind of shows you that it's really going to come down to that offense. If the defense is not able to hold up, which, at a certain point, the dam breaks when you can't replace every guy over and over and keep up the level of intensity. Now, I'm not going to give up because obviously Buffalo, a hell of a team, and especially Josh Allen. But Detroit had also, maybe Detroit needed a loss, right? Because Detroit has just been humming along. We just talked about, and I said Philadelphia winners of 11 straight, right? It's 11 straight now.
Yeah, 10.
10 straight, and Detroit. So Detroit was coming off of what? They were winners of 11 straight coming into the week. So, look, I'm not going to fault Detroit too much because they lost by 6 to Buffalo, the team that I think a lot of us think can easily get to the Super Bowl and win it this year with the MVP. But it is definitely a gut check for Detroit, and maybe it's what they need best. They finish the season now. They get Chicago, the 49ers, and then again, you mentioned it. It could be for the division. It could be for the first. It could be a huge Week 18 matchup with Minnesota, which is exciting for football fans. That we could sort of get a playoff game before the playoffs, but the offense is going to have to really carry the load. And they, scoring 42 points usually wins you football games in the NFL. So
definitely, Rip. And I mean, not to cut you off, but just going to that. I mean, Jared Goff yesterday. Players with 400
are absurd.
Numbers are absurd. Players with 400 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. They were 16-0 going into yesterday. They're 16-1 now because of yesterday's loss. So Jared Goff made a historic impact, and they still weren't able to sustain a victory with that.
Right. And just to touch on that, and we're going to move on, Jared Goff goes for 494 yards, 5 touchdowns. And the irony here for Detroit is now Jared Goff has thrown for 5 touchdowns in the game where they lost, and he's thrown for 5 interceptions in a game that they won. So, sometimes football is like that, right? There's no rhyme or reason, but we know we both like watching Detroit Buffalo. We're definitely going to see them in the playoffs and being a big part of what happens down the stretch and into January this season for both squads. All right, let's talk about some other players quickly here as we move around the league. I thought overall the week that we saw, and obviously 2 games tonight on Monday Night Football, we have Atlanta and Las Vegas, and then we have Minnesota playing tonight as well against the Bears. My thing is I saw just a ton of terrible quarterback play. We just touched on some good quarterback playing, but we saw some terrible quarterback play. Let's start. Let's go to Florida. Let's start it with Miami. Tua, I think maybe his worst game ever, and he's had some bad ones. Mike McDaniel now 3-15 in his career against teams with a 500 record. I guess I just ask you quickly, is there hope for Miami fans in the sense of is Tua ever going to be someone that isn't like this type of player? And same thing for Mike McDaniel. Can he beat good teams? Does he deserve another year?
I think he deserves another year. I mean, early in the season, you lose Tua. It's kind of hard to rally from, losing, the games that you guys lost earlier in the year. But Tua Tagovailoa does have limitations, though, right? Let's be honest with it. He does have limitations, but also we saw the offense get a spark when he came back into the lineup. We know that Tua can definitely he's accurate as hell. And he can deliver pinpoint accurate passes down the field. I mean, with the playmakers that he has around him. But I think you guys need to win in a certain way, right? It's not like you guys can go into a matchup like yesterday, in a tough home environment when you're going up against Houston and win a crucial game. We haven't seen Miami go into a must-win situation and win those type of ball games, right? And that's something that you need to see when you sign a guy like Tua Tagovailoa for the contract that you guys did. If you're committed to a guy, look at Green Bay. They committed to their guy, and we see that their guy can do it without everything around him, right? I mean, he has an amazing young receiving core and a young tight end with them, and just a young team surrounded by him, right? With a great head coach, front office, everything around him. But when you pay a guy, when everything's not panning out the way that it needs to, that guy needs to be the guy, right? Josh Allen, the guy, when we need him to be the guy. Patrick Mahomes, we're talking about Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, be the guy when we need you to be the guy. And Tua still has to answer that question. That's why the question marks were surrounded by the contract that he was given, not only health aside, but also can he win the big games that he needs to win in order for them to be the type of team that they see themselves being. I think Mike McDaniel is going to get another year. I think Tua is going to get another year as well. I don't think you hit that much of a panic button because of how Tua was hurt earlier in the season, but the injury questions still remain. The ability to win in crucial moments still remains. And can they overcome the hump of being a team that can't necessarily travel very well and win the big games when they need to? So definitely question marks going into the season. Won't hit the panic button completely, but I feel your pain being a Dolphins fan, man. I feel your pain, man. I see it through the screen.
I don't know if you feel it. I don't know if you understand it. No, I'm numb to it. At a certain point, you just become numb. It's another Miami season down the drain. All right, but something to watch because I think there's clearly a narrative here. It was Tua's worst game. I read from Pro Football Network stats, worst QB plus game of his career. And just watching it, he looked terrible. I mean, Tyreek Hill, 2 catches, 36 yards. Jalen Waddle injured in the game. It's not going to get it done. Miami loses. Their season is done. On the flip side, CJ Stroud gets it done, has a good game. Houston wins and looks like they're in control of their playoff situation by winning their division.
There's still some question marks with Houston too, though, Rip. I mean, they've got to protect that guy, CJ. CJ's under a lot of pressure this year. He's second most sacked quarterback in the league aside from Caleb Williams. They've got some question marks up front that they need to get settled because if he keeps taking those type of hits, ultimately, it's hard to sustain them. So I want to see Houston protect CJ a little bit more. I want to see them rally as a team a little bit heading into the postseason. Let's end the season strong and see what Houston can do heading into the postseason.
Yeah, look, I mean, Houston was a big dark horse / like this could be the team coming into the season. Obviously, I think we've as a collective public and fandom faded a little bit on their potential, but obviously, they can get it together, and then have now won 2 straight over the state of Florida, Jacksonville, and now Miami. But this is where it really gets tough, and we'll really see what they're made of in the next couple of weeks against, they go to Kansas City next week, then they're home to Baltimore. So 2 massive games, and they finish at Tennessee. So these 2 games coming up next 2 weeks will be interesting to see where Houston is. Obviously, they need a healthy Joe Mixon. He got somewhat banged up in the game. He wasn't good against Miami. But he's been great this season. And so I'm not counting Houston out. They could be a solid playoff contender. And obviously, I'm a big fan of their coach. So let's move off of Houston. Let's go to another team. Just quick thoughts when it comes to what we saw out of Tennessee. Will Levis gets benched. Any thoughts on, is this the end of the Will Levis experiment in Tennessee, or your thoughts around sort of the quarterbacks and their potential? Because there was a lot of bad quarterbacking play, and Will Levis fits right in there. He was replaced by Mason Rudolph.
I think you got to go quarterback searching if you're Tennessee, right? I mean, Will Levis clearly has his ceiling. We've seen some highs from him, but we've seen a lot of lows as well. And you need consistent quarterback play, especially in the division where you have C.J. Stroud. I mean, Trevor Lawrence hasn't panned out the way that we thought he would, but he's still there, and also Anthony Richardson. So all young quarterbacks in that division, and Tennessee's got to go find theirs, right? You draft Malik Willis, you draft Levis, and both haven't necessarily panned out now. Ultimately, Mason Rudolph is not going to be able to go 21 for 26, 209 and 2 touchdowns every week for you. So you definitely got to go quarterback searching. But when you got Malik Willis going to Green Bay and winning 3 straight games when Jordan Love was out, something's going on in Houston, in Tennessee, where, hey, look, we can't rely on Will. 3 interceptions, 8 for 12. Like, it's just not going to get the job done. Got to go quarterback searching, especially with all the quarterbacks that are coming out in this draft. I mean, they're in position potentially to get one of them. I mean, sitting at 3-11, you got competition with the Giants, competition with the Raiders. So it might be tough to go and get yours, but I think you need to put a point of emphasis to go get your young quarterback this year, because a quarterback can change a franchise around, and we've seen it in recent memory.
Totally. Let's take a minute here. We're going to continue for a little bit longer. I want to take a minute to make sure you are following both myself. Obviously, if you're here, you're probably following me, but make sure you are turned on notifications, subscribing, and checking out everything that my guy Terrell Bush TB is doing. He does such a great job joining me here on the morning after every week of the football season, and he's got a ton more that he offers. So make sure you're following him across the different platforms where he offers his content, so you don't miss the good stuff. It's been a consistent theme that I keep hearing about. My followers, my friends are loving the content that he's putting out. We got 151 live viewers throughout the morning. Shout out to Sleaze, Big Draft Energy, some of the guys coming in, job watching, listening for wherever you are. We appreciate you. If you have any questions, you can drop them in.
Yes, shout out the guys, man. Shout out the guys.
Yeah, you can drop out and you can drop a question in the comment. Now, I want to continue with this thought around the quarterback play and move to another guy in the same division. We talked about quickly Levis. I want to go to the Anthony Richardson conversation, because obviously I'm not someone that likes to jump the gun. But what are we to make of what we're seeing out of Anthony Richardson? Because, like, for example, this week, right, Colts have a big matchup with Denver, and I want to dive into this game a little bit, because this was a huge game for both teams, and it literally felt like it was going one way, and it completely switched on a specific play, which I'll get to. But before we get to the play, I just want to read out, Anthony Richardson's overall line for the day. I mean, he's 17 for 38, 172 yards and 2 interceptions. I mean, 17 of 38 is like 42%. I don't know. I'm doing it off the top of my head, but it's not. So you can't survive in the NFL or in any league when you're really doing that. What do you think it is? Because obviously there is this potential that you can see in Anthony Richardson, and there is some excitement, but do you think he's ever going to be able to get to the point where he can be accurate enough to make himself an actual lethal force?
That's the biggest question, right, Rip? Can he be accurate enough? In today's NFL and in the NFL in general, man, throughout recent history, throughout the time the NFL has been the NFL, you need a quarterback that's accurate enough to deliver the ball down the field to win football games. The athleticism can only get you but so far, right? The athleticism is the fancy toy that a lot of quarterbacks in today's game come into the game with, right? And we love to see it. It makes highlight plays. The stature of Anthony Richardson, he's like 6'4", 220 plus, 230 plus pounds. You see the mannerisms. You see him out there, but the mechanics, the accuracy is something that if he doesn't clean up, I don't know if he can be that quarterback that can lead Indianapolis to, a Super Bowl. I don't know. Those questions still remain, right? And like you said, 17 to 38. He was benched earlier this year for his play, came back, and he looked pretty good in certain outings. But that consistency with his accuracy is something that he needs to hone in on these next couple of off seasons. I think they're still going to have him as remaining as their quarterback for the future. He's only a couple years in, so it's time to develop that, right? You have time to develop that as a quarterback, but he needs to go ahead. He needs to go see Peyton, Tom, go spend an offseason with Patty Mahomes and learn how to throw, work on the mechanics. That's what it is. Before you even throw in the football, your footwork, the mechanics, the way you deliver out the throw, you need to make sure that all of those things are cleaned up in order for you to be that franchise quarterback that can then ultimately deliver the Colts a Super Bowl, if that's, something that they see fit with Anthony Richardson. But overall, I think he can potentially be that guy, man. I mean, he has all of the tools except for the accuracy. So hopefully they could clean that up moving forward. But yeah, let's dive more deeper into the game, man.
Yeah, and I just want to close the loop on Anderson. I root for most players anyways, unless you're like the Jets rookie guy or something. But I root for most players. And obviously Anthony Richardson is a sort of a specimen we haven't seen too often in the NFL. And so you root for guys like that. He is young. Obviously, he lost last season for the most part to injury. Had a little bit, early this season where he's benched and so forth. This season, but you got to give him at least another year. And I was very excited about Shane Steichen coming into this season as the coach in Indianapolis. I think it's a great setup. Anthony's, with a good offensive, coach. But it's been somewhat disappointing this season, if we're being honest. He does obviously deserve another year, but he's going to have to figure out that accuracy, because it doesn't matter what you do in the NFL. If you cannot be accurate at the quarterback position, you cannot survive long-term. We've seen other guys get more accurate, one being Josh Allen. I mean, that was the big knock on Josh Allen coming out of college, was the accuracy. He's put it together. We'll see with Anthony, but let's stay at this game because this was a wild game. First off, Denver, Bo Nix, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I mean, we saw, if you were a Bo Nix fan, you had moments where you're like, look, that's my Bo Nix. If you were a Bo Nix hater, you're like, I told you that's why Bo Nix is Bo Nix. We saw everything. But this game turns when the Colts, who are basically dominating the game, I mean, they're in complete control. They're up 13-7. Jonathan Taylor rips off about a 40-yard run and just drops the ball. Like, we've seen this way too many times in the NFL. I don't understand why we keep seeing it. These are professional athletes. I mean, it's mind-boggling, but he drops the ball before crossing the goal line where no one's around him. So it takes away the touchdown, which would have put the Colts up 19-7. Then they could either take, the extra point and go for 2. And it's 19-7 at that point. Instead, it's 13-7 and Denver gets the ball. They go down and immediately get some points. What was your take? This was a complete game changer here in the momentum and everything. I'm watching this game. I couldn't believe how much it changed the game. What were your thoughts on this? And especially this idea, forget that Jonathan Taylor's an all-pro, been in the league a while. What is your take on these guys still being able to mind-boggling methods to dropping the ball before getting into the end zone?
That's a tough thing, right, to do. I absolutely hate when players do this, right? I know me personally, me playing football from the time I was 10 to the time I was about 21, 22 throughout college. I never, ever dropped the ball going into the end zone. And I hate seeing it because why? The massive change in the game that you saw yesterday was basically off of this play right here. It was the crucial turning point in this game. With 12:37 left in the third quarter, Jonathan Taylor could have put them up, like you said, 19 or 20, 21-7. And at that point, you're looking at the way Denver wasn't the offense wasn't clicking, and the way Bo Nix wasn't able to get a rhythm going. You saw that they could potentially have gutted that win out. We're 7-7, still in a chase for the AFC South division. And at the same time, now you're looking at, now we're 13-7. Going into the fourth quarter is 13-10. And then ultimately, there's a pick. They try a trick play, throw it back to Anthony Richardson. It gets picked off for 6. And you see Bo Nix confidence just say, oh, okay. All right, I see what we got going on here. Let's go close out this game then, fellas. And he goes out there, throws 2 more touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they close out the game. But that momentum shift is so crucial for a team that absolutely needed to win that game in order to stay in contention. I mean, they're still there sitting at 6-8, but that's a hard uphill battle to climb. It's a major change going from 6-8 to 7-7. That's a completely different record for them. And so ultimately, that's something for a running back like Jonathan Taylor, who is a veteran, who has seen a lot of success, a Pro Bowler, all all-pro type player, somebody who knows better in these situations. He owned up to it post-game. He owned up to it and said, these are things that can't happen. Moving forward, they won't happen. But that was a crucial situation and a turning point in the game that Denver fully took advantage of. And Bo Nix, closing this out, Bo Nix, he's a rookie. He's a rookie, right? So, you're going to have the games where you see 3 interceptions, multiple interceptions. But what you want to see from him is the ability to close out the game the way that he was. Seeing the change in the game, seeing the momentum shift towards them, and him being able to feed off of that and then deliver accurate passes down the field and ultimately gutting that win out for them. If they win on Thursday night against the Chargers in an AFC battle, man, they could clinch a position in the playoffs, and that's something that bodes well for a player like Bo Nix to gain confidence going into Thursday night. So this was a must-win for them to get out of this game with a win, and ultimately now with the Chargers losing yesterday, this game on Thursday night is going to be a doozy, and I'm glad the NFL flexed it because I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, this was just such a big game, and that turning point that you say. If you didn't watch the games and you were out doing your thing on Sunday, you come home today or you look at the box score and you go, "Oh, Denver 31, Indianapolis 13." You have a completely different view of how that game was, because really, this was an Indianapolis team that felt like he was in control, should have won the game, gave it away, almost quit towards the end there, and then the score completely changes. But you broke it down perfectly. And you love to see it out of Bo Nix, that sort of, he's having a bad day, but he gets it together as the game goes on. He doesn't turn 3 interceptions into 6. He starts turning interceptions into touchdowns. He doesn't let the last play get him on the next play. And you love to see that sort of moxie, that attitude and the ability to overcome when it's not going well. And it wasn't going well for Denver early, but late it turned around. That defense has been exciting. And Denver now 9-5, a team that's over/under was 5.5 coming into the season. A lot of people mock Sean Payton. This is going to be the worst team in the league, all these things. Sean Payton knows a little bit more about football than a lot of us that talk about it and think about it, right? And this is a guy he chose his quarterback in Bo Nix. And look, they're 9-5. They have a huge matchup, as you say, against the Chargers. So they can clinch the playoff spot. I think Denver's in the playoffs regardless of how the season goes. They probably need to win one more, but they probably can get in. And this will be a great matchup against the Chargers this week. All right, just a little bit more time. I always love to pick your brain and go around the place. I'm just going to say one player. We talked enough about different quarterbacks and bad, but speaking of rookies, this rookie wide receiver really has impressed me in a terrible situation. And I just want to touch on BTJ. Brian Thomas Jr. goes for 10 catches, 105 yards on Sunday with 2 touchdowns. He's playing with his backup quarterback now, Mac Jones. I love what I see out of BTJ, about the only exciting part of that Jacksonville offense. So just talk to me, I guess, about BTJ and then take it wherever you want to go on sort of week 15 final takes.
When you look at a team like the Jags, right, and the way that the season has panned out for them, you want to see the bright spots from some of your key players that and especially for BTJ, somebody that they just drafted, right? Coming into the season, with Malik Nabers in the draft, with Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft. And we talked a lot about Marvin Harrison leading up to the draft. But for Brian Thomas to be able to come into the season with all of the turmoil, with all of the injuries, with all of the noise surrounding Jacksonville, and he's having a really, really good season. He's a dominant player. He's going to be somebody for them that they look to down the stretch for the foreseeable future to be their go-to guy. Brian Thomas Jr. is a stud coming into the season. He was projected to be one of the top receivers in the draft, and he's probably having the best season, I think, of the rookies for if you compare it to Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers. Now, granted, Malik Nabers has a similar situation out there in New York with not a steady quarterback, and so hopefully they can fix that up moving forward. But BTJ has definitely had a really good season. And it's good to see, man, for somebody like him, who's a rookie, who's a receiver, who we talked about earlier in the episode, AJ Brown, wanting to get the football, and your success being predicated solely on if you can get the football from your quarterback. So it's great to see him be a bright spot for them overall. But I want to toss it to something that's not as good of a storyline. And that's Patrick Mahomes and the injury that he sustained yesterday, man. They have a tough stretch coming up with some of the games that they're playing in a short time span. I think in the next 10 days to 11 days, they're playing 3 football games. They played yesterday against the Browns, they played Saturday against the Texans, and they play Christmas Day against the Steelers on Netflix. And so you got quick turnarounds. And for Mahomes, who's dealt with ankle injuries in the past, it's tough to see because you need that guy upright if you have any chance of winning a Super Bowl. And of course, we know the Chiefs have aspirations of getting back and potentially winning their third straight Super Bowl. He's one of 5 quarterbacks with 140 hits taken this season, and 36% pressure percentage is on pace for his career high. This offseason, they've got to make a point of emphasis to make sure that they shore up that offensive line for Patty Mahomes. When it speeds up your play like that, is something that you don't want to see, especially from a quarterback. You could get rattled. You don't want to really want to go through your progressions, because if your number one receiver is taken away, then you don't want to look to the second, because you know somebody's right there about to hit Clocky in your face. So ultimately, you want to see Patrick Mahomes outright. Is tough because of the stretch that they have coming up. This is maybe one of the worst times to have him injured, but they're still in a good spot, I mean, overall. But Patrick Mahomes being injured is always going to be a storyline because he is the best quarterback in the game. So ultimately, you know, that's something that I have on my radar. And also, you know, we had it on our run of show, Rip. Hey, the Buccaneers, man, the Buccaneers playing football. After losing 4 straight, they've come along and won 4 straight, 8-6 right now, and they're looking good, man. They're looking good. I mean, Baker Mayfield, he's been stellar. Mike Evans, he is such a dog. Every year in his career, 1,000-yard receiver. He is just prolific, consistent, and just a model of excellence as a receiver in the National Football League. Consistency is the biggest key when you talk about receivers, and he's somebody that's ultimately consistent. For the Chargers, losing 3 of their last 4 games. I mean, the high has come down from their win against Cincinnati a few weeks ago when they had that great Sunday night football game. It was amazing to see, but now they've come down to earth. And that Thursday night football game this week, Rip, is something I've got my eyes completely on, because Denver versus LA for that second spot in that division. And also Denver could clinch a playoff spot with that win. And the Chargers, you know, with another loss, could potentially be looking on the outside in if they don't get things together. So ultimately, that was something else that I've had on my radar as well, man. What's your thoughts on that game?
It's huge. There's no other way to put it than what you said, right? Because the Chargers have now – it's flipped. The dial is flipped. I mean, we were all talking how exciting the Chargers were, and now they've sort of I was disappointed in their Week 15 performance. I thought, you know, they were right in the game with the Bucs, and then the Bucs just drilled them, and I didn't see any comeback. You know, that's the thing. I wanted to. They had Ladd McConkey too, so I understand that their running game is a shell of itself without J.K. Dobbins, and they're looking for that. But I mean, I wanted a little bit more out of the Chargers, and it puts us in a great position for a Chargers-Broncos matchup that's going to be huge this week to see really who is the second team in that division behind KC, not just for the rest of this season, but sort of where you look at the division as it moves forward next year and stuff. And obviously, this is Jim Harbaugh's first season, and he's done a good job with LA, but they still have that Charger feel where they're not getting it done at the end, even though they've done a little bit better this season. So I was disappointed there. I want to stick to the Bucs for a second, though. Just, you know, you mentioned Mike Evans. And when I think about Mike Evans, I think he's probably one of the most underappreciated first ballot Hall of Famers I think we'll ever see, because I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer at the wide receiver position.
For sure.
When you think about his career, I mean, he's gone over 1,000 yards in his career every season he's played in the NFL since 2014. And I expect him to get there again this year, as long as he doesn't miss any of the rest of the games. He's just been unbelievably reliable as a force on the, like, as a true weapon. Because it's not that he catches the most balls. I mean, he's never caught 100 balls in a season. He usually catches anywhere in the 70s. So you don't think of him, oh, he's catching 10 balls a game. But you always are seeing Mike Evans making big plays in the big games. Just like that has been a consistent thing for Tampa for a decade. It doesn't matter the quarterback. It's been just something beautiful to watch. And he just feels like he's the same player since he's come into the league. It's never been different. He's just been awesome. And I just wanted to give a little appreciation to Mike Evans, because you mentioned him, and it's such a delight watching him play. He's such a weapon out there.
Incredible weapon and model of consistency. And I mean, you got to give your flowers to somebody like that, right? In a game where health and your ability to be healthy is crucial. I mean, without you being able to play and be on the field and be of service, you're not usable on a team, right? You're not somebody, if you can't rely on you to make plays, if we can't rely on you to stay healthy, if we can't rely on you to be active and available, the best ability is availability, right? And at the end of the day, Mike Evans has been somebody that's been a model of consistency, man. You can't speak about it enough, man. First ballot Hall of Famer for sure. 1,000 is just his name. I mean, you could just put that in, etch that in stone when he's signing his Hall of Fame and making his speech, man, down in Canton, because he's somebody that deserves his flowers, doesn't get as much because Mike isn't a loud personality, right? He's somebody, he shows up to work, gets the job done, does his media availabilities and goes home, right? He doesn't make much noise. He's just consistent and somebody that continuously provides big numbers year after year. Like you said, not even having 100 catches in a season, but able to make those big down the field plays when needed is something that is definitely, like, you have to just give kudos and shout out to him. So definitely shout out to Mike Evans. And lastly, as we close out, Rip, I mean, let's talk MVP as we close, man. I mean, do you think, I mean, I know a few weeks ago, even before Josh Allen took his game to another level, you were on the Josh Allen MVP train before it got to the heights that it is now. So do you think he's clear cut the MVP as of right now, even with Lamar, having a performance that he did yesterday?
Yeah, I think he is. It's really hard to imagine right now that Josh wouldn't win it, just based on how well he's played, how Buffalo has played with him. I mean, he's overcome all of the obstacles as far as, you might have said if they lost at Detroit, you had a reason, well, can't win, in the biggest of games. But now he's beaten KC, he's beaten Detroit. I mean, and Buffalo is literally humming on offense directly due to him. He hasn't won the award. So I know, no matter what you think, obviously, I think that will give him a little bit of a benefit as opposed to Lamar already having two. Harder for Lamar to get the third one over a guy that hasn't. Lamar's been great. And I think if you actually break down the stats, you might be able to make a valid case for why Lamar's been a little bit better. I'd be willing to hear that if it was there. I'm not saying it is, but I could see how that could be made. But yeah, I think Josh Allen has sewed up this award, unless we see like the final 3 weeks of the season, like 5 interceptions back to back to back. But it's hard to imagine that Josh doesn't win it now, and he's very deserving of it. I mean, everything is there, from their record to the games they've won, to the points they're scoring, to how he's performing, to the plays that he's making. To me, Josh Allen will be the MVP of the 2024 NFL season. Yeah,
they close out with the Patriots next week, the Jets, and then the Patriots to close out the year on January 5th. I think you can you can predict that he'll have a consistent last couple of weeks and he'll win his MVP trophy. I mean, like I said, to start off, and we can close here, Josh Allen is somebody heading into the season who's been projected to win MVPs multiple years, right? The last couple of years, he's been projected to win this award because we know him to be that prolific talent at the quarterback position. I mean, he's somebody who's come close to beating Patrick Mahomes a number of times in the postseason and getting over that hurdle. But in the postseason, we see him play spectacular. Right? It's not necessarily his fault that they've lost these games. Josh Allen just comes into, he just has these spurts where he'll have a 3-4 interception game. He'll have a fumble. He'll have some turnovers, and they'll have some losses, right? And they'll be overshadowed by players like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. But this year, going into the season, we spoke about it before the season too, Rip, the Stephon Diggs trade, right? You losing weapons, you're losing players. And at the end of the day, you up your play and show that you are the guy. I think, that's the definition of an MVP. Who was the most valuable player to their team? And I think this year it's shown in flying colors that Josh Allen this year is the most valuable player for the Buffalo Bills and in the NFL, the way that he's been able to propel this team without the weapons that they've had. And I mean, it just goes, this stat right here just seals the deal right here. First team to beat 2 teams on a 9-game winning streak in season all time. They defeated the Buffalo Bills, are the only team to have done that. They defeated the Lions yesterday, and they defeated the Chiefs in week 11. So, I mean, Josh Allen is beating the guys on his schedule that he's supposed to beat last week, even in a loss, setting historic records. I just think you got to make sure that you see that if you're the voters. And I think overall, I think right now we can clearly say that Josh Allen is the MVP of the NFL.
Absolutely. And just closing with the Josh Allen idea, the reality is, the things that he's changed the most is obviously, so they trade Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen's elevated his game, but really where he's elevated his game, and this was always the thing with Josh Allen coming in, year after year as he's gotten better, is down the stretch, he's either been injured, and so it's affected his play, but he's sort of faded down the stretch of seasons, and the turnovers have been too prevalent. And it's clear that the biggest change in his game is he's gotten rid of the turnovers. He doesn't make that play a game where you're like, oh, that's that one Josh Allen. Like, he's used to been notorious for making 3-4 great plays, but he had that one play where you just, if we could take that back, that's Josh Allen. He's the greatest.
Great point, Rip. Great points for sure.
He doesn't make that. He's got 5 interceptions all season this year. To give you an idea, he's got 25 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions this season. Last year, he's 29 touchdowns, 18 interceptions. Season before that, 14 interceptions. Before that, 15. So it's the limiting of the destructive turnover that has completely changed it. He's just no longer doing that, where he's now one could argue he has less weapons, even though we've seen Shakir get elevated as a good play. Keon Coleman has fit in. Amari Cooper was irrelevant in the game yesterday, and he's on the team. And so Josh Allen has just put the team on his back. The Superman moniker, the cape, his running ability is just, it's incredible to watch. I mean, it really is something different when you watch him. He's just such a fun. He's my most fun player to watch in the NFL. That's coming from a Miami fan, but I've always been a Josh Allen truther, and you love to see it just because you love to see a guy that has that talent, that you sort of see the talent, but you're not seeing the full-fledged amount there in years past. It all come together this year. But again, he could win MVP, but you know what you're going to judge Josh Allen on? It's going to be how he does in the playoffs, especially those playoff games against either Baltimore, Kansas City. So he's going to have the opportunity. We'll see. But this is setting up to be a magical season for not only Josh Allen but the Buffalo Bills. So
magical indeed, man. And the running game as well. James Cook is somebody who's having a career year himself, 13 touchdowns and 171 rushing attempts for 828 yards. The running game is something that they haven't had, in years past. But James Cook has been a revelation for them and something that's been helping Josh Allen as well, not put all of the pressure on him. But he's been Superman regardless. And like you said, closing out, man, the playoffs is right around the corner, right? We're right around the corner for the postseason. We're right around the corner for things to amp up even more. And down the stretch, we have a lot of close games, a lot of good matchups. The NFL schedule makers, they did their thing this year with having some of these matchups down the stretch that could potentially be game changers for teams like Seattle, for teams like Minnesota, who's still searching for the 1 seed in the NFC, for Detroit, for the Chargers and the Broncos closing out the Texans later on in the year. Like, there's still some big time matchups coming up. So we'll see a lot of things come to fruition these next couple of weeks. And I can't wait to talk about it with you, man. The playoffs are right around the corner. I'm so excited for it, man.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Week 15 is a wrap outside of the Monday Night Football games that are tonight. Again, you got Atlanta at Las Vegas. You got Chicago and Minnesota battling. So 2 Monday Night Football games to wrap up Week 15. It is the holiday season. Wishing everyone a happy holidays. We'll be back for Week 16. Exciting. I mean, look, Week 16, we got football a lot next week. We got football Thursday. We got football on Saturday. We got football on Sunday and, of course, Monday. So a lot of football coming at you, not just on your regular Sundays, Thursdays, and Mondays now as we move into Christmas and the New Year's and the best time of the year for the playoffs, the matchups where they mean the most. And if you're in fantasy, good luck there. But TB, finally, tell everyone again, one last time, where they could see you, what you're working on, and anything you want to let them know before we get out of here.
Yes, sir. So right now, working on a piece from last night's game from the Eagles and Steelers, kind of focusing on a little bit of everything that was circling throughout the week and the performances that were able to have by AJ and the turmoil that was claimed to be, but didn't ultimately show face yesterday. So working on that right now. You can follow me at BTB Sports on Instagram, Terrell Bush 05 on Twitter is my personal account, and follow Pro Football Post for all of the latest on all of the news circulating across the NFL and the storylines behind the story. So thank you for the platform, Rip. Shout out to 228 of you guys watching live on X, man, and wherever else on any other platforms that you're watching. Appreciate my Instagram followers for watching as well. As we roll into the playoffs, Rip, I'm so excited to see where we go with things, man. Definitely a fun time, and appreciate you, man. Happy holidays to you as well, bro.
Same. See you next time. Always a pleasure to have you. One of the best. I love having you. We'll see you next time. All right. So that's week 15. TMA football in the books. If you have questions, you have thoughts on what you've heard this morning, again, shout out to my guest and the best in the business, Terrell Bush. Make sure you are following, see his next pieces all over on social. Obviously, he's on the Instagram. Thank you to his followers for tapping in. Can't wait to see what he puts out next. Usually we rock right into fantasy, but look, fantasy is not over for week 15 yet. We have 4 teams in play tonight, so we're holding off on a fantasy segment here. I didn't want to bring anyone on to TMA football for week 15, but as you saw last week when I had PPR fantasy tips, Jared joined me and some others with Sleazeball and Disco, my guys. They're doing all the good stuff to get you locked in on your fantasy playoff matchups. And so week 16 could be the semifinals. Hopefully you made it. We will talk to you during the week on some different shows and platforms around how to help you with fantasy in week 16 if you're still alive. Before week 15, it was a doozy. I'll put out the box score breakdown a little later. I wanted to actually hear from TB before putting out some of my stats, some interesting notes that I had on this week. It was an interesting week of games. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the show this morning. To the 236 people that watched live, tuned in, to all the commenters, to the fans, to the friends. I appreciate you all. We love doing this, and I'll see you back here next Monday morning for TMA football. Have a good one, everybody.